Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to my adventures in role-playing. My name is Trevor Chapman, and I have been participating in the role-playing hobby since 1981. And Happy New Year. It is now 2023, and we'll see what the hell that brings to us. I think we all have been cursed with the phrase, may you live in challenging times. Anyways, over the last several months, I have seen many articles on the internet, and I'm going to name this Fallacies of Role-Playing History or Role-Playing Understanding. There are a lot of people who are really new to the hobby who have these sudden insights or these incredible, things, presuming that those of us that have been in the hobby for as long as we have never had them. Just apparently we've been ignorant or whatever. So there are several things that I want to basically bring up in this video that basically discuss things that people make, and they make statements about those of us that have been gaming as long as we have, and they are so wrong. They have no knowledge of what they speak because they don't know their history. So let us start the ball rolling. Number one, excluding people from the table. I have played D&D for 40 plus years. Women have never been excluded from my table. BIPOC have never been excluded from my table. People's sexual preferences or gender identities have never impacted whether someone could sit at my table. I have sat at tables with all of these people my entire time. If anything, we were excluded from society. Because when I played in the 80s, 90s, you didn't tell people you were a role player because that immediately ostracized you for being a weirdo or an uber geek or whatever term you want to use. So, like, I was first introduced to D&D the Christmas before my Christmas of my grade 6 class. The teacher had bought the Moldave version of the D&D basic set, handed it to me and said, you're going to go home over the Christmas holidays, you're going to learn this, and when you come back, you're going to teach it to everybody who wants to learn. I thought that was awesome. I went home, ingested the book, completely got into it, came back, and over the course of several days, or at least one good day, but probably more than one, I signed out the conference room in the library in my school, and I invited everyone from my class. All half boys, half girls. I invited them all. I explained to them what I was doing. I explained to them the concept of the game. And by the time I was done, I had 5 other guys sitting there willing to go further. Did I not include the girls? No, the girls just were not interested. Like, back then, it was unusual for women to read science fiction or fantasy. They may have, but again, because of fear of ostracization or just whatever, it wasn't announced, wasn't stated. So when you're bringing forward an idea where you're going to play heroes in a game, going up against dragons and monsters and, fighting and casting spells and all this stuff, it did not catch their fancy at all. So they walked away. Most of the boys walked away. They were like, oh, this is stupid or whatever, and off they went, right? We're a bunch of 11-year-olds. What the hell do we know? But a bunch of us stuck around. And those of us that stuck around, yeah, we were ostracized for a while because you play D&D. You're kind of weird. Especially right in the middle of that. By the time I was a teenager, hey, satanic panic. Oh, you're in league with the devil. You're making contracts with El Diablo or whatever. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm playing a role-playing game that's based upon fiction and fantasy and has no bearing on reality. So when they say that we need to make the table more inclusive, I question that. We never made the table exclusive. The only time I've ever asked anyone to not be at my table is when the person was a disruptive player or a disruptive person. And those people, it didn't matter. Boy, girl, black, white, gay, straight, didn't bloody matter. So I challenge the bullshit that we need to make the game more inclusive. The game has never been explicitly exclusive. It's always been, you want to sit down, you want to learn the rules, go. So that's fallacy number one. Fallacy number two is a combination of two things: session zero and veils and lines. So session zero. Oh, it's really good now that the Tasha's book has brought out the idea that we really need to formalize session zero. What? Session zero has been around for 30 years, as far as I remember. I've always had, with all of my games, a character building session where we sat down as a party and discussed, okay, who's going to play what? Let's roll up our characters in front of everybody so that nobody is worried about somebody cheating, especially if you're not using a point-buy system, but you're using a system where you roll 46 and take the 3 highest, and somebody ends up with 4 stats that are 15 and above. That is statistically weird. So we created our characters. We created why our characters had anything to bloody well do with each other. It was not the, oh, you meet in the tavern to answer a reward statement, unless that was what we agreed upon. And then coupled with that is the idea of veils and lines. Now, I played D&D for 40 years. I have never, ever had anybody walk away from my table because they were blatantly disturbed enough to feel that they had to walk away from my table. And looking at the typical veils and lines list of things that are in a game. So let's just go through these. Okay. In a horror game, bugs. Okay, you get it. People have insect phobias. I get it. But I've never had anybody bring it up and say that, I can't play this because, whatever. Blood, that's gore. It all comes down to the descriptive nature. You don't typically describe that, when the person's arm is broken, you don't describe it in a horrible fashion. You just say their arm is broken and leave it to their, to their thing. Again, demons. Well, demons are part of the game. I don't entirely see why, whatever. If it's a veil, it's a line, whatever. Harmed animal, harm to children's, rats, spiders. So relationships, romance, sex, implicit, explicit, PCs, NPCs, PCs and PCs. Again, romance is not something that is typical in any of the games I've ever played. I've never had characters have romantic situations. I think once there was a situation and it was done more for comedy, and the person who was involved, didn't lose their shit over it. Social and culture issues, homophobia, not even discussed, because that goes back to sexuality. I don't care, what your bedroom activities are. Are you beating up the bugbear or not? Racism, that's a weird one, because people make wonderful assumptions that orcs are somehow black people, or that drow are somehow black people, and people are ignorant of the fact that orcs are creatures from the time of the writings of Beowulf, and so are drow. Dark elves. Dark elves are described as the antithesis of the good elves. The good elves are friendly and, positive and light and whatever. And the dark elves live underground and are exactly the opposite. The drow are just interpretation of those folklore creatures. There's no relation to the fact that they have anything to do with people of dark skin or not. Same thing with orcs. Orcs are bestial creatures that are the antithesis of the elves. As far as Tolkien were concerned, they were these savage, brutish, everything the elves weren't. How the hell does that make them black people? Like that is something that people are projecting onto the construct, not implicit into the construct itself. Real world religion. Hey, you want to hear something funny? We actually had to add real world religion to the game as opposed to remove it. A friend of mine, very religious, wanted to play a cleric, but did not want to play a cleric to a pagan god or a non-real god, because he has his faith. So in order to avoid that, issue with him playing a cleric. He decided to play a cleric that was of the variety of they had a philosophical approach, or they didn't have a god. They had a construct that they followed, and that went towards the making the game work. But again, we talked through it. It wasn't a can't do this. Sexism. Well, depending upon what era of D&D you're in, is there sexism? Yeah, but there's sexism both ways. Conan wears a loincloth and is, unbelievably muscled and physically, daunting. If you look at any of the paintings of Frank Frazetta or Boris Vallejo, the men are like incredibly good physical specimens, for lack of a phrase, and they're not, cloistered. They're shown, bare chested and sweaty or oiled. And the same thing with the women. Women are shown wearing chainmail bikinis or the damsel in distress or whatever. But that's just, is it really sexism? I don't know. Is it provocative? Certainly. But again, I've never had issues where anybody has said to me, "Oh, you're sexist," or anything like that. Mental and physical issues: cancer, claustrophobia, freezing to death, gaslighting, genocide, heat stroke, natural disasters, paralysis, police aggression, pregnancy, self-harm, severe weather, sexual assault, starvation, terrorism, torture, thirst. None of these things have been in my games any more or less than they have been in the books that people have read in and around the books. Like if you read a Fritz Leiber book, if you read a Conan novel, if you read Zelazny, if you read Robert Jordan, if you read George R. R. Martin, these are topics of stress. These are topics of things to be overcome or things to prevent from happening to others. They're not seen as a way to torture your players or a way to punish your players or their characters. It's something for them to overcome or something for them to work through. So I think that the idea of people saying that the Section Zero has never been around and that Veils and Lines need to be part of the Section Zero, I think are fallacies. I think that Section Zeros have been around for a very long time, and Veils and Lines do they need to be there? Well, only in the instances where these topics are going to be integral to the story that the storyteller is making or thinks they're going to make. So I see these being more for vampire or werewolf or horror games where these kind of disturbing things are going to be there. But the whole point of a horror game is to be disturbed. It's like saying, I want to go see a horror movie, but I don't want to be scared. Well, then why the hell are you going to a horror movie? Right? That'd be like saying, I want to be on a roller coaster, but I don't want it to go fast. Like it's contrary to the construct of what you're trying to interact with. If you're playing a horror game, you should expect things that will be possibly disturbing or push your buttons, for lack of a better phrase, because it's horror. Now, if it's really going to cause you stress, then yes, maybe you need to reconsider the game that you're playing, or have that conversation with your GM. But I've never had to have conversations with my players because we talk outside of the game. We don't just talk during the game. So I get to learn various things about their history and their past and their likes and their dislikes and the things they want and the things they don't want. I have one player, he very much believes in a white hat, black hat gaming style. The heroes are the white hats, clearly, and the enemies are the black hats, clearly. There's no gray. So he doesn't play games of political intrigue or the world darkness because he doesn't like the idea of anti-heroes or those kind of things. So we just don't play those games. Fine. We know that because we've had that discussion. Have we formalized it in a form with a check mark and a signature and a date? No, we haven't. We had the conversation and we had it casually. It wasn't a forced conversation. So I think that do Veil and Lines have a purpose in very specific circumstances? Yes. Do they have to be ubiquitous? No, I don't think so. I don't think they need to be used all the time. I think they need to be used when and where it's appropriate based upon the kind of game you're playing. If you're playing Pony Finder, I'd like to think that you're not going to have rape and abortion and various topics that are questionable in a game of Pony Finder. Like, again, it comes down to the source. You're playing Call of Cthulhu, it depends on what kind of Call of Cthulhu you're playing. You look at most of the Call of Cthulhu modules, nothing in there that would fall on that list that I just described. So that's another fallacy. Another fallacy is around the idea that somebody made a comment about DMing 5th edition is harder than DMing any of the earlier editions, more specifically OSR. And I take umbrage to that, because if you look at the rule set for basic D&D or 1st edition, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, either one of them, is the rule set more streamlined? Yes. In the case of basic D&D, it's incredibly non-interfering. It's very small. And that's where the DM actually has a great purpose of ensuring that a lot of house rules are developed and followed. A lot of adjudication is made that is fair and equitable. And I don't think that telling a story is determined at all by the edition upon which you are telling that story. Depending upon the game you play, you're going to want to pay as much attention to the background, the strengths, the weaknesses, the drivers, the limiters of your characters, regardless of whether you're playing 1st edition, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 112th, whatever the hell comes up. There's also the weird thought that, people really want their character to grow and develop. Not everybody wants their character to grow and develop other than in abilities and stats. If you say that, then it's the same thing as saying that nobody wants to read Sherlock Holmes, because Sherlock Holmes his character never changes. He's always the same character for all, 60 stories or whatever there is for Sherlock Holmes. No, the whole point is you like Sherlock Holmes being kind of fixed and him being injected into different environments and interacting accordingly. Same thing with D&D. You can have people who want to tell a grandiose story with their character and make their character the center of the universe. Or you have people who just want to play the game and have a character that they play, and that character is kind of fixed. And you know what? Either one is perfectly fine. There is no right way to play D&D. There's no wrong way to play D&D. The only thing that is important is that everyone at the table is having fun. And if that means that you are using the least amount of rules or the most amount of rules, that's your choice. So GMing stories, like 1st edition had a different mentality. Yes, if you look at the dungeon crawls of yesteryear, it clearly had a different mentality. But some of those dungeon crawls are still around. The Tomb of Horrors has been recreated for every edition of D&D. Can't quote me on 4th. I didn't follow 4th. As far as I'm concerned, there is no 4th. But in 5th edition, the one of the mega books is based upon the Tomb of Horrors. Is it adapted and filled out? Yes, but it's still the Tomb of Horrors. And the Tomb of Horrors itself is reprinted for 5th edition in Tales from the Yawning Portal. Same thing with the Temple of Elemental Evil. Same thing with Against the Giants. Same thing with Saltmarsh and the 3U series. All of those have been reprinted, Ravenloft even more so. Why? Well, because the adventures are good regardless of the rules that you use to play the adventures. So is it easier to DM older stuff? No, it's no easier or no harder. It's just a different skill set. When you DM the earlier editions, some of the earlier editions, specifically basic and 1st edition, there's a lot more freedom because not everything is codified. You don't have a rule for everything. You don't have a description for everything. You don't have a table for everything. You have a lot more in 1st edition than you have in basic, but far more now than there was before. Does that make it harder? No. It just makes it different. And that's the key. It's different. The D&D I played as a 12-year-old kid is not the D&D that I play now as a 52-year-old man. it's not the same that a 22-year-old kid today plays either. And we all play our own way. We all have our own things. And then coming along with that, player agency. This is a fallacy. It's a fallacy because partially because I don't agree with it. So if you want to call me a gatekeeper right now, go ahead. I don't care. You can call me a gatekeeper and I'll say, fine, I'm a gatekeeper in this particular case. But it seems like everything revolves around the player's ability to not be infringed upon. You cannot have anything that the GM decides, determines, provides, whatever you want to call it, cause my agency of my player to be infracted upon. Why not? You're not the center of the goddamn universe, and you're not the end all be all. You are a player with a bunch of other players in an environment in which shit happens. And sometimes the shit that happens isn't to your benefit. Guess what that's called? A challenge. Something that you have to overcome, something you have to work around, something you have to work through, something you have to work with. If I'm just going to be providing you all of the things you need for your character to take whatever grandiose story arc that you need, write a book. Don't expect me to just facilitate your story and your story and your story and your story. Give me as much flexibility to create the story that I want as much as you want your story. I'm not going to screw you over. I'm not going to give you a circumstance where you don't get something. Like if you're working towards a goal, I will work with you towards that goal. But I have goals as well as a storyteller. Now, my story is not the story. Your story is not the story. Our story is the story. The only difference is the GM is the one who kind of has to put all the pieces together to make the story for everyone happy. And along with this player agency thing, I personally believe that people are more comfortable with the dice screwing them over than the GM making a decision that doesn't go in their favor. Because apparently if the GM makes a decision that's not in their favor, the GM is being heavy-handed or blah, 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 blah. But if the dice roll, well, that's just the way the dice roll. Well, that's what? That's you're more comfortable with a random number generator being harsh than you are with a GM making a decision that says, no, you can't do those 72 different things you want to do all today. Like, there has to, the purpose of a GM is to give the environment in which you play, the story in which you play, portray the characters upon which you interact with, and to provide the challenges that you need to overcome to fulfill whatever the story is. Also, to adjudicate in those instances where the rules either conflict or aren't defined. And therefore, the GM has the ability to say, this is my decision. Is it right? Is it wrong? Doesn't matter. It's a decision in that point in time. If you have a problem with that decision, do not stop the game and say, no, you're wrong. Play on, suck it up, be annoyed, and then at the end say to the GM, you know what, I think you adjudicated that wrong, or that rule wasn't appropriate, or I have a question around that. And then you work it out, and either you codify it and make a house rule, or the GM says, no, that's, I think that makes sense. You debate it back and forth, the group debates it, but you don't want to halt the play to question the GM because he's not giving you something that you think you deserve or you're owed. It's a story that is written by many people, and different people are going to have different ways of interpreting that story. So don't think your story is the only story. It's a group story and everybody has to be happy, but that means you have to compromise, and that means that sometimes you don't get what you want. New and shiny being better. 5th edition is better than 4th. 4th is better than 3. 3 is better than 2. I call bullshit. I'm sorry. Every edition of the game fulfilled a requirement for the people who played that version of the game. Some people learned 4th edition as the first edition of D&D, and when they went to 5th, they were disappointed. I started with the basic book 40 years ago, 40 some odd years ago. I played 1st edition. I jumped into 2nd edition. 2nd edition wasn't a big change from 1st. It just made things a little bit better. I think 2nd edition was improvement on 1st edition. But by the end of 2nd edition, they introduced the Powers and Skills book and other books that broke the system, in my opinion. They created weird things that I thought was trying to be too, not power gamery, but trying to give people, more choice than necessary. 3rd edition comes out. I love third edition. 3.5, is better than 3 because they fixed the problems they had with 3.0. They learned from that to play test when they went forward. But there are books in 3.x that I will not put up my table because I think they're broken. I think that some of the later books did the same kind of thing. The infamous idea that, well, why does a wizard get to cast a spell and do 75 points of damage to 80 guys, and a fighter can only attack like 5 people at a time? Because that's the role that they play. Fighters can take out goblins at 1st level. Not too bad. Wizard hiding in the back hopes to God one of the goblins doesn't get through or shoot him with an arrow because he's going to go down. Right? So wizards are weak at the beginning and strong at the end. Fighters are strong at the beginning and not as strong at the end. They still serve their purpose. They still have their needs. Rogues, kind of all the way through. Clerics, more like the wizard, but a little bit nicer. So again, there were books towards the end, the Book of 9 Swords being the one that comes to mind, where they came up with techniques or whatever the hell the damn things were called. I looked at the book and went, no, I can't put this at my table because I know someone's going to break the game. So no. And that's the thing, is that is one D&D going to be better than 5th edition? For some people, yes. For some people, no. And guess what? Choose the edition you want to play. I play 3.x. I have so much material for 3.x, I never need to go to another edition. As long as I can get people to sit at the table with me who are willing to learn 3.x. Because, yeah, 5th edition may be the most popular version of D&D, but that doesn't make it the version that's right for me. So the idea of an edition war is bullshit. Pick the edition you're willing to pay, pick the edition your party is willing to play, and act accordingly. I GM both 3.x edition and 5th edition. Why? My party plays 3.x. That's the version we all like. That's the version we play with. My daughter and her friends play 5th. So I learn 5th and I play 5th. And for all you people that are worried that 1D&D HASBRO is going to go bankrupt and the game's going to go away and blah, blah, blah. No, it's not. HASBRO folds tomorrow, or Wizards of the Coast folds tomorrow. Guess what? Every single book they've ever published still exists. They're not published. You can't basically buy a physical copy. You can buy a PDF, you can borrow a PDF, you can whatever. Buy used copies, but that's a crazy thing. But the game's still there. And we have the OGL for 3rd edition, 4th edition, and 5th edition. I can make product right now for 3.x. I actually have a book downstairs that was published last year, 2022, which is a 3.5 version book. It provides rules and stuff for 3.5. You can take any adventure from any era and any version and run it. If you're just telling the story, the combat, you adjust for the game you're playing, right? The treasure, you adjust for the game you're playing. Because I tell you this, if you play a 1st edition module with a 3.5 group, they're going to have a lot of magic items because the 1st edition really handed them out and was not concerned. Oh, you're in a 4th level module. Here's a +5 Holy Avenger. Holy crap. So Edition Wars, it's what you choose. And if I choose 3.5 at my table, that'll be the agreement I make with my my party and we'll move on. And if you don't like it, well, then we don't have to play together. But don't call me a gatekeeper because I prefer a version that you don't like. Same thing with Shadowrun. I play 3rd edition of Shadowrun because I like the 3rd edition rules. I like the 3rd edition world, and what they brought in 4th, 5th, and 6th edition. I don't want to go with that version. I think 6th edition has a better resolution mechanic than 3rd edition, but 6th edition also has other things I don't like. Technomancers, wireless, various things that I think break the game. So that's the give and take. I don't get both, I get the one. And if I really want to, I could sit down, get some 6th edition books, figure out the mechanic, figure out how to adapt it, play 3.5 world with 6th edition rules. But that, again, the new version isn't necessarily the best version. Now, going off of that, we have D&D is the number one game. D&D is the only game. There are hundreds of role-playing games. There are role-playing games that still can be purchased that are from the early days of D&D. Top Secret, 1st edition, 2nd edition, New World Order. I bet you if you look hard enough, you can find Gangbusters, which is based around the roaring 20s and 30s, being a mob boss or fighting the mob. Boot Hill, a game about the Wild West. Star Frontiers, it's a different story. Traveler, Twilight 2000, Shadowrun, as I've already discussed. There are so many games that you can pick any of them. And just because they're not current, they haven't been made in 25 years, like Marvel Superheroes. Is it a good game? Yes. If you're a big fan of Marvel and you want to play in the Marvel world, it's great. And its mechanics work. Are they the slickest things? No, but anybody who says that, those rules are too hard, people won't learn them. We learn them. You learn what you need to learn to play the game you want to play. And there are a lot of people who don't know half the rules for 5th edition, and they play 5th edition all the time. You only need to learn what you need to learn for your character, which is why people who don't want to really, do too much deep thought, play a fighter or play a rogue. People who want a little bit more, play the slightly more interesting characters. People who really want to get into the nitty-gritty things, they play a wizard or they play a cleric or they play a sorcerer because you need to know more. And everyone's first character typically is a fighter. Why? Because that's pretty straightforward. I go out there and I hit things. So we all can learn the rules. You just have to be willing to play it. And if you find people who want to play like the older games, like Twilight 2000, Paranoia. I'd love to play a game of Paranoia. Oh, it's not current. Who cares if it's current? Right? It is what it is. Right? So play the edition you want to play in the world you want to play. Let your GM tell the story as much as you tell the story. Be willing to let things not go your way if it works better for the group as a whole. Don't make a character that is not a group player. Don't make a character that has a group concern. Like I've seen so many instances where somebody will make a character as part of a group and then they're not a group player. They're doing their own thing and they're not helping the GM tell the story. Well, go play your own friggin' game. Go play a one-on-one with somebody and forget everybody else. Like, why are you ruining everybody else's game? Because you have this urge to be the, to hold all the pieces, not let any of them go. Your character may have been designed that way, but to me, that's a flawed character. You're making a character that doesn't have a reason to be invested in the party. They have a reason to do everything but be invested in the party. Well, that's, again, session 0, make a group, come up with an understanding, and come up while you're all going to work together. Rules over storytelling, or rules over mechanics, or storytelling versus mechanics. There is not a battle there. It's not like if you have a mechanically designed game that you can't have storytelling, and if you have a storytelling game, there are no mechanics. The two of them, they both need to be there. You need to have a solid set of mechanics upon which to play and create story. The whole point of the mechanics, it goes back to playing cops and robbers as a kid. You go around, bang, bang, I shot you. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. The rules are there to answer that question. The rules are there to create random noise, chaos in the mix. I'm the biggest, baddest guy. I take a shot. It should be simple. Oh, crap. I rolled a 1. I miss. That happens, right? And no matter how good you are, there's a chance of failure. No matter how bad you are, there's a chance of success. The mechanics facilitate those and try to normalize them, but at the same time, they still provide for those extremes. My son and I just played 18 hours of BattleTech over the last week and a half. BattleTech is for those people that don't know, it's a tabletop game. It's purely a tactical game where you move giant robots and they shoot and try to blow each other up, and you have an objective or whatever. But there is no real storytelling inherent in the game. But we told a story that we shared with our friends through our Discord channel, basically saying, here's the turn, here's the physical actions that were occurred, and then here's some radio chatter from the people that are interacting. We gave we had 12 mechs, so 12 pilots. They each had their own little personality. We told a story with a game. Like, you can tell a story with a game of chess if you really want to. You can elaborate on the moves and create storytelling around that. So the mechanics are there to give you a foundation upon which the storytelling can be told, and that storytelling is ideally fair and equitable to the majority of the people at the table, or everybody at the table, right? When you have a game where one person or one character type has benefits that make them unbalanced to the rest of the table, there's a problem. And that's sometimes what happens with the various versions of D&D, that people go out there and find these ridiculous optimizations and then make it less fun for the other people at the table. Because, like, I played a game in 2nd edition D&D where one of the characters had min-maxed his character such that he had like 5 attacks every 2 rounds, and he hit with a shitload of damage and blah, 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 blah. So we'd get into combat and he'd walk in and we'd all just stand back. We had no reason to be there. He couldn't be hit, he couldn't miss, and he couldn't take out anything. So in that sense, we just said, okay, fine, let him go fight that. We'll go check out what's on the wall over here, because we don't need to be in the combat. He can handle it, right? But that made it unfair for anybody who wanted to play a combative character. I tried to make a combative character, but my combative character in no way, shape, or form could compete with his. So it made my enjoyment less, because I made this cool concept that failed. And again, back to session 0, building as a party, not building as individuals, and coming to a table with characters that are different enough to be a problem. Okay, problematic issues as part of storytelling. So Star Frontiers, they come out with the new version of Star Frontiers, and they reintroduced the Hadozi, who actually were originally in Spelljammer. And that's where the confusion lies. The Hadozi originally existed in Star Frontiers under a different name, but flying squirrel monkeys. They were brought into Spelljammer in 2nd edition, and they have this backstory. And the backstory is, you may not know it, so I'll quickly sum it up. They're a race of small primates living on a planet. A wizard comes to the planet with his entourage, comes up with a potion to increase the intelligence and size of the Hadozi, in the intention of basically enslaving the race and making them his, his army or whatever. The entourage decide this is a bad idea. They help the Hadozi, who have grown, take over the wizard, get rid of him, and then for some reason the Hadozi decide it's a good idea to give this potion to the rest of their society so that everyone is equal, or at least equal-ish. Now, Wizards of the Coast recently had to apologize for this because they brought up a concept of slavery, and they brought up the potential concept of a white savior, blah, 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 blah. Now, here's my thing. This is an opportunity for, in a role-playing environment, to deal with a real-world issue in a way that allows you to work through it, work with it, work through it, understand it. You know, we all believe slavery is wrong. There's not a single person that I'm aware of that thinks that we should have slaves. Are there people in the world who believe that? Yes. Is there currently a slave trade? Yes. There's a huge slave trade in the world, and people don't want to acknowledge that. It's beside the point. But, so the Hadozi were supposed to be slaves, but fought against their slaver and rebelled, and now are a free people. Is that not a good story? Is that, like, we can never have an instance of slavery ever in a game, even if the slavery is being depicted as bad and something that should be overcome? Really? Never? Like, I don't understand that. It's, you know, and the bad guy is a white dude. Like, right now, you would think everyone would be happy for the fact that the bad guy is a white dude. Like, so I don't understand why you can't have that. It's in their history. People back then didn't understand. People understood just as much. Slavery was bad. A guy tried to enslave people. They did not get enslaved. They rebelled and won and moved on. And it's in their past. It's not yesterday. It's in the past of the species. It's in their historical background. So just ignore it. Just don't talk about it. Like, it's still there, right? Like, these are opportunities for us to address issues that in real life may not be easy to address, and the GM can drive the story to bring out understandings around the topic that people may not understand, and therefore grow, get people to be broader, more liberal in their concepts, more understanding of the delicacies of the issue. So what other topics can we not bring up in D&D because they might be controversial? Isn't the whole point of playing an escapist game to play things that are escapist? And, like, how many fantasy books exist? How many science fiction books exist where there are slaves? Like L. Ron Hubbard, Battlefield Earth, humans are slaves. Conan, good portion of those stories probably have slavery. Even Robert Jordan, The Wheel of Time, the demand are slaves of their owners. So are we going to ban all these books because they have slavery? Are they endorsing slavery? No, they're not endorsing it. They're saying this guy is a bad guy and is clearly a bad guy because he's a slaver. These people are bad people because they are slavers. They are the bad guy. They are wearing the black hat. The white hat should take them out or do whatever is necessary. So I don't understand why we can't have these topics if the topics are properly addressed and properly managed. It's one thing to make it, like, really ugly and inappropriate, sure. But just as in general, we should be finding ways to use this as a learning tool. So there are all these concepts, fallacies, beliefs that exist in the modern gamer's mind, the 20-somethings, the 30-somethings, who look at me, the grognard, the curmudgeon, and go, you're just a gatekeeper. You don't understand. Like, another perfect example. Saw a video recently where this guy was explaining they should change hit points and they should change armor class because they're not reflective of reality. The argument always being, if you have 1 hit point or you have 1,000 hit points, neither one of them has a direct impact on your ability to do stuff. Yes, because it is a construct of the game. It's not representative of real life. Because guess what? You can cast spells in this game. So if you're worried about things being realistic, the whole magic thing should vanish pretty quickly. Armor is like, well, it's either you do damage or you don't. There's no, like, it's a binary construct. Yes, because that's the way it was designed. These are not meant to be realistic. These are just meant to be, ways of managing the story. And the guy goes on to say, well, here's better options, or here's other options, or whatever. And it just sounded like we, people my age, people that started this this industry, as purchasers of the product, have never considered this. We've never said, armor class is kind of weird, or hit points are kind of weird. Like, shouldn't you have it so that if you're down 25% of hit points, you have a modifier? If you're 50%, you have a modifier. And if you're 75%, you have a modifier. And guess what? There are games that do. Shadowrun is a perfect example. You have 10 boxes, 11 boxes to your health bar. When you lose one, you have a -1 modifier to everything that you do. You lose 3, you have a -2 modifier to everything you do. You lose 6, you have a -3 modifier to everything you do. That exists, right? But it's not, in the most common game, which is D&D. But so house rule it, whatever. But don't presume that you've come up with something that hasn't been reinvented before. Never mind the fact that the people who made these games didn't just come up with, here's armor class, whole cloth, good to go. No, I'm certain they came up with 9 or 10 or 12 different ways of managing that concept, that mechanic. And that was the mechanic they decided to go with. So again, you're going to not like what I'm about to say. It's the hubris of youth. It's the supposition that because you are younger and more aware and more woke, or whatever damn term you want to give it, more in tune, that you have a better touch on how to manage this. I'm sorry. We have been trying to do these things for eons. And that's why a lot of the games, a lot of people have house rules. Like my number one house rule, 3.5 edition, first 5 levels, maximum hit points. You don't roll. You just get the max. After that, you roll 2 dice and take the higher. Why? Game can be pretty lethal. It's to give my players a comfort that they're not going to be a wizard who's 5th level with 5 hit points. Because you could be that. You could be a fighter at 5th level with 5 hit points. If you roll and you get 1s all the friggin' time, but that's 3.5 edition, right? 5th edition is a different way of handling it. Star Wars Saga edition has a different way of handling it. Everybody has their own way. So we have house rules for a reason, right? So there is no right or wrong way to do D&D. There is the way that works for you and the people at your table, and anybody who it's not working for will either excuse themselves or will be excused. There are people who play, like, I watch Black Pants Legion. Well, I listen to their podcast, and they're playing a version of Dark Heresy. So Dark Heresy is Warhammer 40K having to do with the Inquisition, the people that are out there taking care of the aliens and the demons and stuff like that. And 40K is a very, very dark, grim, dark world. It's dirty, it's nasty, lethality is high, whatever. They're playing it tongue-in-cheek. They're playing it with a large amount of humor. And guess what? It works. They're playing in a future that is disgustingly grim, and they are playing it with unintentional comedy. They're not going out there to be comedic, but they're not sitting there, serious and being like, Christian Bale in Batman movies, they're basically, being flighty. for lack of a better phrase, and it works for them. And there are probably people who see that Dark Heresy game and go, oh my God, they're fucking ruining the game. For you, but for them it works. For me, it works. I've decided if I ever play a game of Dark Heresy, I'm going to play it lighthearted. I'm going to still have the oppressive nature of the game or of the world and of the game, because the mechanics are very oppressive, but I'll do it with a, satirical or dry comedy flair, because I think that makes the game work. And so by listening to their podcast, I got a different take on how to play the game. Otherwise, you're thinking you're playing the game straight, and that can be very depressing. So there's no right or wrong way other than the table. The right way is the one that's at your table. The right way to play D&D is the way that's at your table. And no matter what that way is, no matter what that way involves, it could be a multi-hall campaign, it could be a dark and dirty campaign, it could be like, a theater troupe working around building a theater and have nothing to do with monsters or adventures. It's all politicking. And guess what? That works for you. And D&D is not the only game. It is the most popular game, and it is the original game. It is the game that brought the concept of role-playing into the modern era. It didn't exist otherwise. But very shortly after it came out, people caught on that this is a good idea, and they came up with games that competed with D&D that had nothing to do with fantasy. Traveler is a good example. It was science fiction based. It was entirely, that went everywhere from being, Star Trek landing on a planet that is, pre-industrial, to high space opera and everything in between. And that's the way the game was designed. It's just like D&D. You can play D&D where you are playing a bunch, murder hobos. I hate that term, but I see where it comes from. It just, to me, it's very derogatory, which is what it's intended to be. Or you can play where you're a bunch of aristocrats in Waterdeep dealing with the political scene and trying to deal with the, manipulations of the other houses. Like, you can play D&D any way you want, as long as it's the way your players want to play and everyone is having fun. Do you need lines and veils? That is a personal choice. I, having played 40 years, have never, ever, ever had anybody walk away from my table because of anything that was presented at the table. And if you look at all of the modules that have ever been published for D&D, including those for Ravenloft, they have not brought to fore any of those topics. Rats and bats and spiders and insects, okay, that's fine. Those are monsters. But, rape, incest, blood, guts, gore, sex, whatever. It's not there. Not intended to be there. And in the rare instances that it was there, like Silver Palace of the Princess, or I can't remember what the damn thing's called, but it had a provocative picture of a woman chained up and was quickly, pulled out once it was realized that maybe it's a little more provocative than D&D needs, especially during the Satanic Panic. Yeah, so there are many people who are on YouTube and who are on podcasts who are spouting statements about role-playing that are fallacies because they know not of what they speak, because they are making presumptions around whatever they're presuming it around, thinking that people like me are ignorant and xenophobic and gatekeepers and curmudgeons and possibly a few other horrible words, because we apparently have never fixed these problems. Well, okay, not for lack of trying, for those of us that wanted to fix them, or just ignoring them, because if it's a problem, then just don't involve it. Like, page 1 of every DMG that I've ever read has said these are guidelines. These are not hard, fast rules. These are not written in, like the 10 Commandments. They're not written in stone, never to be, modified. These are guidelines around which you can develop your game. And if you look at people who played online, I haven't seen much of Matt Mercer and the gang, but I can guarantee you that they don't play by the hard, fast rules. They don't play by them, rules as written. They modify them for their game purpose. They do things that work for them because that's what the story they want to tell. So we've been doing that for almost 50 years. It'll be 50 years next year, next August. I don't know exactly when it was published, but I'm pretty certain one D&D will be released either at Gen Con or at Wizards thing, which I think is in August, July. 50 years. We've been doing this. We've been playing this game and dealing with the same problems that you're dealing with and either pushing them aside or writing our home brews or managing it no better or no worse than you are. And I'm sorry, yes, things change, society changes. There are many things that are acceptable now that were not acceptable 35 years ago. There are many things that are the other way. And society changes, but those of us that were there are never asked our opinion around these presumptions that people are making. And so I am presenting this as my opinion to the world saying, hey, guess what? We tried, or we just ignored it, or whatever. Is D&D perfect? No. Will it ever be? No. Will it be good enough? Always. Always good enough. And will you have to play one D&D when it comes out? Will you have to join a digital tabletop? Will you have to buy into whatever model of marketing they go with? No. And for all those people who are upset, oh, I can't believe that, Wizards of the Coast had the audacity to say that D&D is under-monetized. Why do you think that's a wrong statement? It's a statement you don't like. Yep. But HASBRO, and by extension Wizards of the Coast, are companies whose sole purpose is to increase the value of their stock for their stockholders, to increase the return on investment of their shareholders. That's it. That is their bottom line. They failed to do that. Nothing else matters. Therefore, why is one D&D coming out? Well, because 50th anniversary is coming out. It's a really good time to do a good switch on things. It's a good time to throw out a new version because the current version has been around longer than any other version, I believe, or really darn close to it. So, hey, guess what? It's a money-making opportunity. We can bring out a new version of Player's Handbook, PMG, and Monster Manual like we have 5 other times. And like those 5 other times, they will sell. For people who already bought one or more of the previous editions. It's a new sale to an existing customer. It's new revenue from someone who hadn't given us revenue for possibly 10 years. That's a win. So Wizards of the Coast, HASBRO, is going to do whatever is in the best interest of making their shareholders happy. Will that make their customers happy? That matters only in so much as whether it negatively impacts the shareholders' revenue. If half the people stop playing D&D or stop buying D&D, but the other half offset that value and the difference in money, they don't care. They don't care how many people play D&D. They don't care how many people play D&D according to the rules. They don't care how many people do anything. What they care about is whether they make more money this quarter than they made this quarter last year, and whether they make more money this year than they made last year, and whether they'll make more money next year than they did this year. That is their driving goal. And any year that doesn't happen, stuff will change. So if you really don't want one D&D to work because you think it's broken, don't buy it. Simple. Do not buy into it. Play 3rd edition, play 4th edition, play 5th edition, play Traveler, play something else to show them you're upset. And when they see that the revenue isn't where the revenue should be to make their shareholders happy, they're going to do something about it. They will then listen to us. Right now, they're listening to the people that are giving them the answers they want to hear. Hey guys, here's a new set of rules for Unearthed Arcana. Oh, over 65% of you agree with these? Clearly we're on the right track. Are they on the right track? I don't know. I'm hearing a lot of people are very upset with, with what's going on. Am I hearing the minority of people who are just openly antagonistic against the process? Are they only listening to the people that are responding to them in the way that they want to hear? Because I can tell you this, I am pretty certain that Wizards of the Coast never sat down and asked a randomized sampling of D&D players from every era. Hey, we're looking to do this. What's your take on it? They sent out Unearthed Arcana, and then with it, there's a link that says, hey, give us your feedback. Only people who are going to respond to that are, people who look at it and people who actually have an opinion about it. So, I'm sorry, you're not getting my answers because I'm not reading it. I don't care. You can do whatever the hell you want with D&D. You can burn it to the ground right now. I have 3.5 and all the stuff I need to make the game work for me. And the things that you're doing, I don't see as being bettering the game. Really, they're just changing the game. So, people will say 3.5 is bloated. Maybe, but I like crunch with my, my fluff. I like good mechanics. I like using maps to do combat. I did so many years of theater of the mind that created so many arguments about whether a guy could run across the room, open a door into another room, and hit a guy 4 times. Because, I can do it in 6 seconds. Watch. Like, it's not the point. Like, I was so happy when 3rd edition came up with economy of action. You had move and attack, full attack, swift action, free action. Like, it was broken up. Was there a lot of them? Yeah, it got a little bit crazy towards the end, and Pathfinder really went nuts with it in 1st edition. But to me, that was an improvement to the game. Now, people are trying to go the other way and say, well, let's do theater of the mind. We shouldn't have to have a battle map. Well, fine, then don't have a battle map. That's fine. Go back to the way that it used to be. But you're going to end up having conversations that I've had before where people will expect that they can do more than they can, or layouts won't be worked out, like whatever. It comes down to the fact that I like playing a strategy, tactical game with my D&D. And if that means I spend 3.5 hours doing nothing but a big boss fight, I'm okay with that. That's the price I pay for playing the version of D&D I want to play. So, play what you want to play. Play it with who you want to play it with. Use the tools that you have. Use the tools that you want to use. But make certain that everyone around that table is happy and is getting what they want from the game. And that includes your GM. Don't make your GM nothing more than your method of going through an adventure because they're the only one who's going to read it and they're going to just push you through it. They should be given the opportunity to tell the stories that they want to tell or change the stories however they want. I've played the Return to Temple of Elemental Evils kind of once. Well, I went through the map, but the story the GM told had nothing to do with the module. When I bought the module 5 years after I played it, I don't know what's going on. So again, they have stories they want to tell. They don't just want to be there to facilitate your story, you individually. They want to be there to facilitate the group story and whatever adventure they put together to satisfy your craving to play. Oh, that's everything I want to bring up. I learned a lesson later in D&D that I forgot about. I used to believe that any D&D was better than bad D&D. Bad D&D was better than no D&D. Why did I believe that? Well, because when I grew up, finding players was hard. There were so few. it was really hard because you couldn't really like wear a placard that said I'm a I play D&D, because that would, people would go, oh, at that point you're anathema. So you had to be careful about who you brought it up to and who you didn't bring it up to. And then when you found people, it was the only way you were going to get D&D. There's 6 of you around the table, maybe 3 of them you can tolerate, and the other 2 you put up with because they're there. So you guys who are complaining that you can't find D&D, you guys make me laugh. You are in so much of a rich world that I was in ever, because you have all these online forums and online games, and you have the online games. You can play with people in Australia if you work out your time schedule. I have. It's weird, but you can do it. So anybody who complains today that they can't find a game isn't looking hard enough. When I played, you only had word of mouth, and you didn't have choice. You didn't have the ability to interview people. Like, there are people now who interview their players and pick, because it's a buyer's market. They can pick the 4 people they want to play with, interviewing 20, because there's so many people who want to play. I played, I found a person, come, please, let's go play. Like, it was desperation, and that desperation led to some unpleasant experiences that I have learned from. And now that I have this plethora, it's like, you know what? I'll put my name out there and I'll say, hey, I want to play this, and this is what I want to play. And if you want to play it, we'll play it. If you don't, that's fine. I'll go find somebody else. So people today are in a incredibly great situation. D&D, there's a lot of it. D&D is not only accepted, it's endorsed. You don't have the vilification of people saying, oh, you're a Satanist because you play D&D. Now, are there people who still do that? Yes, but it's not the whole world. You don't have to defend why you play D&D. You don't have to explain it. When you say D&D, people are more capable of going, oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Because it's ubiquitous. So you guys are in a great world. Stop trying to suggest that any of the issues that existed before are our fault and that we did nothing about it. We did a lot of things, and you never ask us what we did or didn't do, or what we saw or we didn't see. You come to me and you say, oh yeah, you never let women at your table. I was happy to have women at my table. Any girl who wanted to sit down and play D&D with us, we would have been like slack-jawed and going, okay. Like, it would have been fine. And guess what? I now have women at all my tables, because D&D has become more accepted, and therefore there's more women who do it. And honestly, I think that things have changed. People are more interested in things than they were before. I think that there were a lot of girls who maybe read fantasy novels, but just D&D was for geeks and nerds and a bunch of smelly boys, because that's who played the game. Did they want to play it? Maybe. For example, my wife. My wife did not know D&D existed until she got to university, and she's been playing with me as long as we've been together, because she thinks it's awesome, and I think it's awesome. And had she have known about it when she was 11 or 12, she probably would have been playing it then. But she wasn't aware of it. And that's part of the reason why girls didn't play D&D. It wasn't in their social circle. Because the guys who played D&D were the ostracized geeks and nerds who were not part of the social circle that involved a lot of girls. So, anyways, it's enough. I have ranted for more than an hour. I can do that. Thank you very much for listening. Again, my name is Trevor Chapman. And if you want to respond to this, give me hell, tell me I'm a moron, give me exaltations, ratnef@gmail.com, RATENEF@gmail.com. Send me a note. And again, I am completely comfortable with you telling me I'm wrong, because maybe I am. But this is the way I understand it. And if I learn differently, I will tell differently. So have yourselves a happy 2023, or at least the beginning of it. And we will talk to you next time.